Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Great to be here with you all. I'll just say that actually the update is that now I live in West Oakland on Huichin land. Ohlone folks also, but Huichin. All right. So I was born in Vietnam, but I was adopted when I was 8. So today is Mother's Day. And it did remind me of a cross stitch that my adoptive mother had made when I first moved here. That's not true. When I first came back after the monastery and had a place, I found a cross stitch that she had done. And it said, "Let go, let God." So I wanted to talk about that today. So actually, and also in 2014, we actually started Access to Zen. A whole bunch of people took courses with me and wanted to start a group. And then, I just come back from overseas. I still had a flip phone, but anyway, a guy was like, "You gotta have a website," and we decided to call it Access to Zen. So I did these blog posts from A to Z, and this is technically G for God, and that's where I got this. Yeah. So this is part from that post. It says, my adoptive mother was an embroiderer. She made this piece years ago, and when she died, I found it among her stuff and kept it, obviously to remember her by. Many years ago, when I was 16 and refused to go with her to the weekly Sunday school and service at our local Presbyterian church over what I thought was hypocritical teachings around the famine in Ethiopia, a story for another post. This is in the 1980s. She started that one, So when I refused to go, she shared that one of her biggest regrets in life was that neither I nor my sister or brother became Christians. She was a devout Presbyterian, a deacon, and even taught Bible study classes. Soon after her death in 1995, I started to meditate. There was not even a thought at that point of becoming a priest. And then I started in the Insight tradition. And then I went to Tassajara to just work the summer to do a 3-month practice period. I had no intention of becoming a Zen anything, but I like to say that the Zen bug, which is a big one, bit me. And so I stayed and ordained, and now I'm empowered in this lineage. So I was saying that I was reminded of that conversation with her, and then causing regret to another is never a good feeling. With all honesty, I never regretted not returning to the church. There were some years of angst about it all, but all in all, it was mild, and so the not returning wasn't so much active resistance, but more lack of resonance. I was at my mother's side for the last week and then minutes of her life, and also for my father's. It seems to me that my mother's dying process was smoother because she had God and her faith to draw upon. It really seemed to comfort her. Let go, let God. So that was the part of the post. So when I was thinking about this, I thought, well, what are we obviously letting go, the part I kept, I thought, oh, that goes with the Buddhist stuff, right? Letting go, we hear about it all the time. And then let God. And remind us on your name?
Marcus.
Marcus, yeah, hi, welcome. So what is that, to let go and let God? And I'm not giving you the Christian version, obviously. It does point me towards, and I was thinking a lot, and actually I'll just start out by saying, okay, take your hand, and when you're upset, what do? You kind of wring your hand, right? Kind of wring your hand. And so I also was thinking about the condition of the nation and the world right now. I find myself wringing my hands a lot, don't you? Like I'm just wringing my hand, right? Oh, and then a lot of time I'm also like, fuck, right? What's going on? I don't get it, but it's a lot of hand wringing. And to me, this is kind of what it's pointing towards. When we're just all tangled up, you know, and just wringing your hand and everything's tight and contracted, really, literally, like physically, then there's something about learning to let go, to kind of stop that. And so letting go from the untangling of overthinking, of thinking too much. Now, we will say, what are we letting go into? And this, the sense of God is, I would say, in terms of Buddhists and Soto Zen in particular, it's about the relative and the absolute. This is our relative world. I think of things like this, I see things like this is happening to me. And, you know, it's all important, mind you. You know, my girlfriend finally got a California Humanity grant to finish a documentary on Phyllis Lyon and her queer care team as she was dying. 3 years she's applied. She got it this year, but guess what? No money. So it's like and then right? So our everyday life is the relative, or what's called the G in Japanese and Soto Zen. So the relative, our relative life. It's also points towards our really rational thinking, how we define phenomena, how we make differences, how we say, you know, this is a hand that has thumb and fingers and palm. We differentiate. This is part of our experience. So it's and that's all conditioned. Just like when you said count to 5, I had to pull it up a little bit, you know, probably most of us, myself included, at first thought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but then there's the uno, dos, tres. I mean, that's still 5, right? But it's very much that personal, relative experience. And it's also how we've been taught to define and interpret the world. Our relative life. And then the re is the we could think of God, or we could think of what is it that's the absolute. And in Buddhism, certainly we have that, right? Perhaps in Soto Zen in particular, we like to say that we are actually really pointing towards, I've heard teachers say, you know, we point towards the absolute a lot. What is the thing that you can't quite, you know what it is, but you can't quite say, define it completely. So it's also, in Zen, you like to almost point towards a way of understanding as intuitive knowing. Not so much the rational, which is the G, but the re is the absolute, right? The sense of what is it that is bigger than us, the essence of things. It also can be defined as the void or the essence. You could say, you know, in a maybe a way to understand is we can all say that we understand love, or I hope we all have an idea of what love is, but just that our idea and how is it shown is a relative, but there is that bigger sense about love that most of us in the world could have a sense of. How it is exchanged and how is it that we know it is the relational part, the difference between how we are taught it, our ideas of it, and the bigger sense of it, and then that interaction. So there's a teaching in Zen called the Sandokai, the harmony of difference and equality. There's a translation. And san means, this is Uki Roshi from Branching Stream Flowing in the Dark. That's one of the lines in the Sandokai. Oh, and the Sandokai was written in the 8th century. It was a poem, and it was written as a response to, there was a big fight in the Zen world about the Northern School, which is a Soto Zen school, how the methodology is step by step. You got to contemplate a lot to get to enlightenment. And the Southern school, the Soto Zen, and then the Rinzai folks, which is all about the sudden enlightenment, like just like that, you're already enlightened, and don't have to work so hard. You're just like that, right? And so, you know, like many things, it's this thing of like methodology differences. The goal is the same, but the methodology, and this is where it gets stuck, right? In the relative world, we often get stuck in the how things are done, which doesn't mean make it bad, mind you, but it just, I want to bring it up because this is where we also get into conflict when there's the dichotomy of slow and fast, step by step, sudden, right? So it doesn't, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have those kind of views, but when we hold tight to those as the only way, when we get stuck in the relative and don't make room for other relative and the interaction, the conversation, the negotiating. So the san means three, so it means you, or another way we can think about relative and absolute is this dichotomy of also relative and absolute is a setup, right? You outside, absolute, or me inside, relative, right? And then the third is actually the we, or again, the connection or the negotiation. And do means sameness, oneness, the whole be. And then kai is this mixture, this interaction. All right. The lines in that poem goes like this. All the objects of the senses interact and yet do not. Interacting brings involvement. Otherwise, each keeps its place. I wasn't sure I wanted to say the stanza, but actually the sound while we're meditating is a perfect example of this, isn't it? All the objects of the senses interact and yet do not. Our ears receive sound. We go to interpret. That's the interaction, right? Interaction brings involvement. If we keep on interacting, it's going to interpret. You know, we heard all the different ways that we all interpreted it, right? Some of us knew what it was, and most of us spent the time. And even when you knew, you probably had to kind of figure it out a little, right? Otherwise, each keeps its place. So this stanza is actually saying we live in a relative. This duality that we set up of reality isn't necessarily a bad thing. It is how we're conditioned. And so how do we keep on engaging? That's the practice, not deciding, oh, it's only me and it's only you, right? It's the continual interaction that is life, that is practice. Now, since we live mostly in the relative world, by that we go through and we interpret everything from this point of view, right? We could have gone into, I could have said, oh, I'm the teacher. That sound really was. In fact, in some ways, you know, Jeff was like, oh, did you bring the sound? Like you all, you know, like thought I'm the one who did it, right? Right? So it's also that, where do we give the power? Another way to understand ji and ri is self-power or other power, right? And God, for a long time, or in some tradition, is very much about other power. So we also have to be really careful that's, while there is an absolute, our understanding of the absolute is relative. And it's also conditioned how we understand the absolute. which doesn't mean there isn't an absolute, mind you. It's just that we have to hold that as our understanding of it is limited. Doesn't mean we shouldn't try, or it doesn't mean that we don't know it. This is where the intuitive knowing and resting in that really, you want to strengthen, because there's a knowing. Just like I like to say in retreat, you know, when you have those insights, when you think about it, the content of the insight, you know before, right? Those insights, don't they feel like, oh yeah, I know that. But in retreat, you're just quiet and settle, and you're willing to let that information reverberate in a way that feels more full and absolute, right? Like, oh yeah, this is worthy of my attention and my focus to live by. Nothing new happens in a retreat. How you receive it and how you are open to a new way of interpreting it, or a new way of it resonating in your life. That's what really is happening, in my sense. So a lot of that has to do, how do we let go, right? How do we let go into this, another sense of the absolute, to letting it reveal itself? Notice all these words I use in the meditation, right? For you. And one is that hand-wringing, so that's that entangling of, or looping of the story of what's happening right now to me, or to me as my sense of the world. Doesn't make it wrong, mind you, just to know that it tends to be very loopy. You know, you have a soap opera, you're the star of your soap opera. There are some actors that keep showing up. Their faces might change, but they still are doing the same thing, right? So this is, and we all carry that. And knowing that is important. And then knowing that you could have different episodes, right? Could help, right? And so we want to kind of notice when we're tightening. Again, that hand wringing, there's a definite kind of tightening. Now, we also want to let go of the dependency on that the thinking will fix everything. So much of our life, I like to also think of it as, you know, we live in this part, and yet most of our body is the whole body. So much more is down here. So bringing that down in some way, literally, like bringing it down and experiencing. This is why so much of our practice, especially insight practice in particular, is very much about sensation-based and noticing literally your senses and what's going on moment by moment, how it's revealing itself. Again, also in your meditation. Now, you know, in Zen we have a mudra. I will say I am now being trained with Gil Fronsdal, who started in Zen and now teaches mostly Vipassana, and I'm getting empowered in him. So I've been doing a lot of insight retreats. So I was like, should I put my hand here? And then I decided to do the Zen mudra. And so this mudra, which felt really great because I've done it for years, right? And this mudra is called the cosmic mudra. And besides having a really nice name, it is, for us, it's partly a way to literally have a sense of how your heart and mind is happening. So one, you notice it's a oval shape, not a circle. This is too much effort. This is just the balance between efforting and non-efforting. This kind of relax. It's also over your life force, your chi. That's why it's called, partly why it's called the cosmic mudra. And then the other thing is we're asked to notice these thumbs are put together, just lightly touching. Suzuki Roshi said, if you put a piece of finger, oh, that's scary. Piece of paper between your two thumbs, the fingers, then you can just hold it. This is obviously very big, but so the idea is that, you know, you could hold that piece of paper. And that's important because what tends to happen as we meditate is the thumbs will often go like this. So this is that too much effort I'm thinking a lot. If you pay, so part of it is when you pay attention to your mudra as opposed to just what's happening in your mind. When you notice this in the hand, and the thumbs in particular, then when you go to the mind, often you will notice that you're trying to problem fix, right? How can I get a bigger raise? How will I pay my grocery bills? Which is an old-fashioned word according to some people, but for many of us, this is, something we do worry about, to me, correctly or with value in our life, right? So it's a lot of that comparative, trying to fix from the mind. So it's also, to me, this sense of that G. How can I fix this? What am I going to do? It places over attention on the G, right? On the relative, and in particular, just me. Doesn't make it bad, mind you. It just shows you that there isn't a balance. Now, the other thing is, we also ask to watch when it sinks, or often it comes apart, right? The sides, by the way, this one usually you're like sitting up too straight, or you're leaning forward trying to fix it. And then this one you're tend to be like, like sinking, right? And so this is the hand sagging, right? Now, sometimes that's just, I'm tired. Sometimes it's, fuck it, I'm overwhelmed. I'm just going to give up. I'm just not going to make the effort, right? Now, that's different from non-effort. So when is it that we just kind of give it up and just say, let God take care of me. God determined this. Or systems determine this. Or the world is doing shit to me. It's very much like giving it up to the other power, or the sense of something big and its over influence on you. And so notice that then the practice is, how is it that we keep staying connected in a balanced, harmonious way? Not overpower my power, relative, and not so much the giving up into others, right? I think I live in West Oakland now, and there's a mural, and it says, something like, I meant to take a picture so I could, like, you think, someone will come and save you, right? That kind of idea. All right. What else do I want to say? So, when to let go, and to whom or to what are we letting go into? I know that Presbyterians, my experience, is actually one of the more liberal sects of Christianity. And certainly there's a sense of God as something that you know internally, that God's not just out there, but God is right here also. And so this practice of how do we negotiate, when are we letting go of our over? Yes, it does take personal effort, but when do we overly dependent on that or perseverate on that, right? Remember the cause of suffering in Buddhism is the obsessiveness or the perseveration in terms of the Four Noble Truths, right? Of what is happening. Not the thing itself, but the energy, the quality that we're bringing to it. So when we're obsessively doing one like this or this, right, or this, I give up, right? Then, but this like, I give up, or I gotta fix this, right? So when do we notice which one that we're, right now, it's fine to fix something, but when do you overdo it? It's fine to sometimes say, okay, I can't do this all myself. So it's, again, not the thing or the movement or the ideal or just the conditions, but what is our quality of meeting that? And then what is our interaction with that? Is there a sense of a certain kind of balance that we can return to when we've noticed that we've, are not harmonious and we're off balance in one way or another? I came out to my mother, or my parents. I realized I was a lesbian in college, and then I came home for Thanksgiving, and I told my parents, and this is in 1980 something. It was just before the picture of the two men on is it Time magazine, right, about the AIDS crisis? Newsweek, thank you. And my adoptive parent, my father was a doctor and my mother was a nurse. And so my dad's first thing, I can still see the scene in the living room in North Dakota, which I'm still recovering from. Not the scene, North Dakota. So, my father's like, oh, what about AIDS? And I know at the time it's like lesbians were considered, low risk. And so I'm like, dude, you don't know what, you might be a doctor, but you don't know what you're talking about, right? And then my mother was really quiet. But the next morning, as I got up, and it was Thanksgiving Day, so she was in the kitchen early, starting to cook. And she said to me, remember, she was very devout Christian. And she said, oh, I've had some really good women friends in my life, but I don't understand this thing that you're talking about. I don't understand this kind of love that you're talking about. And I was like, shit, here comes, right? And then she said, however, I think what's most important is that you love and that you have someone who loves you, right? So to me, this is a story. My mother, right, has an idea of something. She has also the idea of love, right? And then in that exchange, right, in that negotiation, by the way, Suzuki Roshi talk about kai, or the negotiation, as a handshake. As a handshake. So two things meeting and joining in a friendly way. My mother, holding her understanding as relative, having her idea of love, and God was in her love, I'm sure, And yet that love could give her the sense of, okay, I don't understand it, and yet for me this is what's important, and that's what I'm willing to share with you so that we stay connected in this, right? Trust me, she did not get it perfect after that, right? So it's not like, oh, with that statement, she got it, right? By any means. And yet, in that moment, there was that exchange of being able to connect in a meaningful way. And that's the kai. The kai and the negotiation isn't static. It's always changing and in context. And in some ways, our practice is to reinterpret our experience, to reframe it in a way that makes sense now, which doesn't mean it doesn't have actual facts or it doesn't have the value of our feeling and our sense of what it is. All right. I'll end with this, and there's the rest of my blog post for that. So I remember, she never knew when I was meditating, or she died in 95. Okay? And when I ordained, she certainly didn't. And so I like to think that if my mother was alive today, she would be happy that I had religion or spirituality, no matter what version it is. I'm not Christian. I like to think that the sense of wonder and awe that comes with knowing there's more than what one thinks and believes, be it about oneself, others, the world, or the unknown, and a real felt sense of connection we both have, hers to her God and mine to something beyond words and concepts. It's something we could have resonance together. I miss my mother. Here's a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, which I think reflects Christian and Buddhist ideas, which could be a basis for this shared resonance. This is from Thich Nhat Hanh. The kingdom of God is available to you in the here and now. But the question is whether you are available to the kingdom. Our practice is to make ourselves ready for the kingdom so that it can be manifest in the here and now. Thank you for listening. All right, I'd love to have some Kai and interaction with you all on this.
I'd love to share a little story. Since it's Mother's Day and thinking about that moment with your mom, I had a similar moment where for the first time in my life, I brought home a partner to stay in my mom's house. We traveled from San Francisco to DC, and then there was this moment at bedtime, and I was like, all of a sudden, I was like, oh, whoa, my mom's a devout Catholic. I don't know if I can sleep with you in her house and be respectful. And I said, I'm going to go ask her. And I went down the hallway, and suddenly I was 12 again. And I couldn't ask her. I was 40 years old, I couldn't ask her. I was terrified. I didn't go around the corner where she was in the kitchen. I came back in, I said to my partner, oh, I don't know, I can't ask her, I can't do it, I don't know, I'm like I'm a kid again. And we were standing there talking, and he's like, I'll be fine, I'll go in the other room. And up here, I was like, I don't know. And then my mom comes into the room where we were standing and said, are you guys going to be warm enough with those blankets?
Oh.
And I'm like, that was like, that blew me away. Because she was a really seriously devout Catholic and had her beliefs, but somehow,
Yeah.
in that moment, she really challenged herself.
Yeah. Oh, that's a beautiful story. Yeah. Beautiful story. It's so funny, my story was that I almost said, but I was like, that's enough story. But since you brought that up, I'll just say, I was out for, at least 5 years or something, and I was with a partner for at that point, at least 4 years. And my parents moved to Indonesia and to Jakarta, and so we went to visit, right? And she's showing us around the house that's there. And then she's like, so this is a room you could stay in, and this is a room you could stay in, Kim. And we're like, missed. So, yeah. She couldn't quite do it that time. But then she didn't force us, so we were like, we're sleeping together. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
And remind us your name, please.
Tom.
Tom, thank you.
Thank you for all those thoughts and insights. That story you told about your mother saying, like, well, I don't really understand this, but reminded me that when I came out to my mother, her response was, I'm not really sure how I feel about this, but you're my son, and I love you,
Yeah.
and that's what counts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, the understanding would come later and, all that stuff. But, I'd like to remind people who are contemplating coming out, which are few and far between now, that used to be a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
People would ask your friends' advice and stuff. Now it just seems to, flow. But I used to tell them, okay, you've had to live with this for how long? And wrestle with it and go through a process and stuff. You can't expect them to just jump from where they are to where you are in a conversation or overnight or in a week or a month. So give them the time you've allowed yourself to come to terms.
Yeah. And similarly, I see your hand. Just to make another point about the G and Re thing, in some ways, what I hear in that story also, at least the way I frame it for myself, is when I meet moments in which I really don't understand and I'm having a hard time getting, if I can somehow have this sense of not just like, I don't get this, explain it to me, how do I make sense of it, but some sense bigger to be informed by it, or some kind of connection, then I know I tend to be more open to the possibility of staying connected to that person or people who are giving me the information that I'm having a hard time processing. So it's that being able to let go of, I don't get this, to, okay, inform me. And then we work on that together, yeah. And remind us your name?
Oh, David.
David, yeah.
First, thanks for your help. And this is just a reflection on what people have been saying so far. And these stories where someone is expanding or stretching their relative idea. Because we were talking about relative and sort of absolute things. And there's a sort of relief when you have an encounter, I guess, where both perspectives are considering more of an absolute, even if it challenges the whatever relative constructs that we have about ourselves. But I'm also thinking about the opposite, since everyone's coming out story or whatever may not be so positive, and that what happens when relatives' ideas and like all the suffering that is a result of being stuck to our relative ideas. I first think about that between conversations and people, like human relationships, A to B, and there's a lot of suffering, I feel like, in my part, like in my partner, when I'm stuck to a relative idea of how something should be, that's my own suffering. But for a lot of people, myself included, I think the most suffering that I cause is being stuck to relative ideas, but ones that are self-referential, talking about like the loop in your head and something. So this is an unfinished thought, maybe like your reflection, but like how to not be stuck on our own relative thoughts, because we definitely spend a lot of time there, but also cause a lot of suffering in that space. But because it's between me and myself and not between me and another person, it's harder to free that conflict. So yeah.
So how to resolve that? How much time do I have? Well, there's a lot of ways to answer that. And one thing I would say is, well, a couple of things I'd say. One is that I think it's a big moment to recognize when, oh yeah, this is just my understanding of things, right? And then to have that be not as in, and I'm right, and they're wrong, right? But just like, oh yeah, this is just my point of view. And then to also have that space to say, oh, that's just their point of view, right? And so that's one. Two is, so much of our practice is actually to recognize, when does that become really tight? In fact, in some ways, that's all our practice for years and years, or days and days, right? Right? Just like in a retreat, the first 3 days are hard because we're just like, it should be like this. I should be like this. I should have done this. The container should be like this. There shouldn't have been any noise, right? I mean, I spent some time, like I'm sitting here thinking, oh, how can I rest in this? But I'm like, they come here every week, don't they? What is that noise? haven't they figured that out, right? Like, and then I heard some walking. I'm like, I hope somebody goes to take care of that, right? Right? So it's like that I, a bit like what you're saying, like I am right or they are wrong. So we want to really be careful about that. And also, however, to have enough sense then to also say, okay, if I really don't understand, to let them reveal themselves to me. And then the other thing I think we forget about is that, And I think this is overly emphasized in practice. Again, in practice, yes, yes, yes. So much of our practice is just to sit here and receive. And so much of that practice, in that learning to receive, is to actually develop what's called a non-judgmental receptivity, right? It's not just to receive and then be onslaught by it. So this is where we could say, okay, that's enough. And either say pause or say this isn't safe, I don't need to keep doing this, right? And so how do I go to do that? That's also part of our practice. How do I attend? So much of our practice is also, how do I attend to what's here? Because when I attend to what's here, then I'm much more settled. And so whatever you say doesn't have as much chance of triggering or activating me. And this is also how we have more compassion, right? Because when we're settled, whatever's there can be what it is. Just like when we're settled, you know, for the years in which internalized homophobia is like, so every time someone calls me XYZ, I'm like, fuck you, you know, I'm responding, or I go and be shameful. But when I have enough settledness in my queerness, and sometimes that is to reclaim that, like when we use the word queer, right? And we reclaim that word. So it isn't a passive thing. It can be an active thing for sure. But when we're settled in that, now people call me all sorts of shit, and I'd be like, okay, your ignorance, your problem, not mine, right? So that's also part of it, right? How do we, you know, as Mel Wiseman, my Dharma grandfather, likes to say, if you're given a gift, you don't have to accept. They may think it's a gift, telling me how they think about me, but I don't have to accept it. I can say, no, that's yours, and to keep it there. So I think this real sense of that negotiation is in context, and it can mean pausing or even ending, you know. And I think sometimes we have the sense, my sense, and broadly in Buddhism is I have to keep engaging. You know, this is it. I have to be like, blah, and accept everything and just be equanimous. I don't think that's necessary, so.
No discernment.
Hmm?
That will be without discernment.
Yes, very nice. And the discernment is negotiable too, by the way, so, yeah.
Always there.
Yep. And fundamentally in Buddhism, discernment in some ways is also the point of practice. We're always discerning. When does the G need to be attended to, and when does the Re need to be attended to, and when is that negotiation is what we need to attend to. That's part of the discernment. And that's done by taking in information, learning the Dharma, teachings. That takes reflection, and that reflection also includes interactive kind of reflection practices. And then it takes, in Buddhism, then it takes a meditative quality. So a way of reflecting that isn't our conditioned way of processing information. And just discerning which one is the one we need to practice, strengthening our wisdom, or discernment is certainly part of the practice.
Anybody online?
Yeah, anyone online? Yes, what's your name?
Andrea.
And you're the cause of our frustration, is that right?
I'm the bird.
Ah, yes, a bird that sings a song, yeah.
I'm a lot of bird.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I was listening to you, and what I kept thinking was, is that true, and what else is possible?
Is it true and what?
What else is possible?
When is it possible?
What else
Oh.
is possible?
Uh-huh.
Because,
Sorry, I'm hard of hearing.
yeah,
I forgot my ear.
get some hearing aids.
I know. I know, I forgot them.
What else is possible? And
Uh-huh.
that's something, I have a good friend who is a priest in the Zen.
Mm-hmm.
And all those words kind of confuse me sometimes.
Mm.
You know, it's like, why didn't you say so in the first place? You
Why
know,
didn't I
and
what?
That's probably, why didn't you say so in the first place?
Oh.
And it's probably the fast one versus the, you know, when you were talking about two schools of thought. And, But that's what I kept thinking, and I thought that that is one of the biggest changes in my spiritual practice and in my life and in being in the world, is having very, it opens my heart and it shuts off this. And it's not that I don't have opinions,
Mm-hmm.
but to give up being right
Mm-hmm.
and to just engage
Mm-hmm.
Feels like a gift of not only this Buddhist practice I'm on, but also of my 12-step recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And above all, it seems to lead to being a student and a teacher at the same
Mhm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And the best teacher I have in either one of those are by observing how people who are further along than I am,
How people what?
who are further along than
Mm.
I am, interact with the world
Mm.
and what they notice, and I notice what they notice, and thus I open up more.
Mm.
So, I just wanted to say that was what I got out of your talking. Thank you.
Mm. Thank you.
Sorry about the bird.
So did I hear you say that thinking what else is possible was kind of that fundamental thing? Yeah, I think that could be the answer to your question too. What else is possible? You know, I like to, one of my definition, I'm not a scholar, definition of emptiness is certainly possibility. Everything's included in possibility. Right, so it's interesting. Jack, what street were we on when we met earlier?
Lexington.
Lexington. Oh, so I was like, Bartlett, where's Bartlett? I knew it was between Mission and Valencia, but I thought we were a block that way more, so then I met Jack walking here. And we were outside this house, and he was telling me, you can tell them the history out in the social time, but it was built for, oh, okay, I'll say it briefly, or you say it briefly.
Working-class people.
For working class people.
In the 19th century, San Francisco was expanding so quickly that working class people had much higher incomes and could actually afford small houses to own, which was unusual for that class. And so that's what we still have on those streets.
Yeah. And we were outside this house that had, not quite neon, but those lights that spelled out hope. And I took a picture because I was thinking, oh, it's like a doorway, right? You enter through a doorway of hope. And what is hope? Except for some sense of faith in possibilities, that things are different than what you conceive of them right now. Certainly. And yet we also don't want to just give in to hope as like a fluffy thing. We have to put some active doing and strategies and stuff towards what we hope for, certainly. But yeah. Yeah, and in some ways that's our practice. We keep opening up the possibilities. Yes. Tell us your name.
My name is Jim. It just occurred to me how, not just to me, but how unexpected, and talk about possibilities, that the new Pope is American and was a street priest in South America. Completely unexpected. And yet there's a revolution in that. Anyway, in terms of hope, the universe is endlessly possible, and we don't know what's going to happen next. And anyway, I feel it's almost like blessings of all the great mothers on the planet that we have a kind man in such an important position.
Yeah, and it's interesting because while he's from here, he never spoke English, right, when he first came out. And then also they consider him, what's that term that they've been using? A man of the world, in the sense of that, you know, he's lived in Peru and very much of a, I think someone said, it's not the passport, it's the person. Yeah, about him.
All right, you should wrap up.
Yes. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, you guys have a dedication of marriage?
We could use yours or ours, but first we have to do announcements.
Oh, all right, announcement, and then I'll make yours, so let's do yours.
Our merit master.
By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives.